Ladies, gentlemen, and exiles of all ages, people are pushing deeper and deeper into the endgame, and one of the major markers of progression for every player in Path of Exile 2's early access is how many times you have ascended. The first time that you ascend, you get to choose your ascendancy, and you gain 2 points to spend within it. Then you get another 2 points the next 3 times that you ascend, up to your maximum of 8 ascendancy points. We've talked a ton about how to achieve the first 3 of these over the last couple of weeks in various videos, but today, as people reach this point of the game in higher numbers, it's time to go into detail on how to achieve your final ascendance, get your last 2 points to spend within your tree, and that last bump of ascendancy specific power with it. First up, in case you didn't know, the 4th ascendancy comes from doing one of the 2 trials at its maximum number of floors or chambers. For the trial of the Sekhemas, or Sanctum, as Path of Exile 1 players call it, you need a Jinn Barya that is level 75 or higher, which will have 4 floors. It will also have a little tagline on it there that says it'll give you your next ascendancy points if you haven't done it already. For the trials of Chaos, you need an ultimatum that is at least level 75 with 10 trials on it, and you need to defeat the final boss at the end of it, the pinnacle boss. Generally speaking, across the board, players agree that the trial of the Sekhemas is way easier in general, especially for achieving this, and while both of them require you to overcome a pinnacle boss at the end in order to actually earn your points, the journey towards that pinnacle boss within the trial beforehand is far more consistent and reliable on Trial of the Sekhemas, especially as the Trials of Chaos, as the name implies, has a lot more RNG associated with it. It forces negatives upon you and gives you very little choice between them. The best tips that I can give you if you do go the Trials of Chaos route are just to try your best not to get any afflictions between rooms that make the boss pound your face in at the end, and that's much easier said than done. I honestly really don't recommend it for specifically this point, at least with the way that it's balanced right now. So instead, I'm going to spend most of today talking about the Trial of the Sekhemas, how to make it easier, what to do and what to avoid, and then specific tips and gameplay of the final boss as well, as that is the main hurdle to overcoming this trial on this difficulty to unlock your final ascendancy points. Starting at the very top then, you want your Barya entry coin to be as close to level 75 as possible. This activity scales exponentially in between floors, and the lower the starting area level is, the easier it will be overall by the end, with it being very easy to feel the difference between a level 75 4th floor and a level 80 4th floor. You can find Baryas on the trade market. Level 75 or 76 ones are rare and tend to go very quick, but you can usually find a level 77 coin for 1 exalted orb if you want to have a go at this and are out of them yourself. Past that, there are the relics as well. As you complete each difficulty tier for the first time of this activity, you unlock more relic slots for the next time you go in. And so before starting this one, you should be able to fit in 4 larger relics and 1 smaller one like I've got here. My biggest recommendation above all else is to hit 75% honor resistance between all of your relics. Honor resistance is unique to this trial, but it caps at the same point as every other type of resistance in the game, so 75% is your goal. Then you want to boost maximum honor. Your honor is defined by a mix of your defensive stats, and then also the bonus maximum honor percent stat from relics or boons within the activity too, so this stat matters quite a bit. Past this, the amount of honor taken off each time that you are hit also depends on the damage that would also be taken, so boosting survivability stats like resistances and armor are actually quite strong for specifically that purpose. The final relic modifier I specifically recommend is increased boss damage if you have that option, and the spare space as well, as the hardest part of this by far of completing it, outside of occasionally just getting ruined by a forced affliction option, is the boss itself. So the more damage that you can pump into the boss, the faster it dies, and the easier the whole thing gets. The other main relic modifier that I heavily recommend if you can get it is just bonuses to your defenses as a whole, because of how that scales into your maximum honor as well. To be a bit more clear about defenses and how your maximum honor is calculated in general, your actual honor loss when hit is reduced depending on how much damage the hit would do. So things like armor or elemental resistances will apply as normal in a useful way in here, even on top of honor resistance in itself. Evasion works the way that it always does, by which I mean that you don't get extra honor scaling from evasion because you still evade hits which would otherwise cost honor while having evasion. The main things that do scale your honor upwards though are things like maximum life, maximum energy shield, and if you work in things like mind over matter as a keystone, which makes you take damage from mana before your life pool, it also seems to scale your honor off of your mana pool too, which is why when Josh as an archmage stormweaver walks into the trial has over 13,000 maximum honor compared to me hitting around 5,000 on my invoker depending on my gear swaps. That said, with evasion and armor, you can get honor loss per hit down to such a tiny amount that for the most part, it really does just come down to not slowly getting chipped down in honor through the whole trial, and then of course just making sure you don't get one-shot by a straight telegraphed attack, or the one-shot phase for the final boss. As you start the trial then, you will likely have already done the first 3 floors beforehand, and now you will be be strong enough that those 3 floors going through them again should be pretty much just a non-contest. You could walk through them with your eyes closed. That said, you should take specific advantage of this to take some more risks early on. There are 3 main goals that you have for the early floors. The first is to avoid getting negative afflictions in general, but with a specific focus on avoiding the afflictions that lower your own damage, lower your main defensive stat, by which I mean I have no armor obviously, so the affliction that removes your armor isn't a problem for me. You don't want ones that increase the enemy's damage either, you don't want ones that increase enemy health or defenses, and one that may seem harmless early on is the affliction that makes you take % life damage each time that you are hit, which theoretically is whatever, really, right? I mean, getting hit loses honor, so you want to avoid being hit anyways, right? Well, the final boss specifically has an attack where if you aren't extremely careful, you'll get frozen in place, and he sprays a load of lightning at you, and it counts as like 30 hits in a fraction of a second, and without this affliction, that just sort of tickles you. It doesn't even take away much honor, but if you have that affliction, it will just insta-kill you, so avoid this at all costs. As for boons, aim for anything that increases your damage, especially if you are ailment-based. It will even make your ailments apply faster or harder. Bonus maximum honor is great from boons too. Bonus to your defenses is fantastic as well, and also will boost your maximum honor too. And then a really underrated one in here is the one that gives you 40% increased movement speed. This is super useful for a lot of reasons, but especially for the final boss. He has a phase where you either need really high movement speed or specifically a movement type skill, or you'll just die. So I rate the movement speed boon very, very highly. Outside of that, you want to focus very hard early on in your run on stacking up sacred water, the actual currency within the activity. There are also boons and afflictions that can affect sacred water, so those are worth considering as well with this in mind, but use your early floors where you have little to no danger to take as many sacred water fountains as you can along the actual reward path, because if you walk up to the merchant during this with like 1,000 sacred water, you can very easily just turn an okay run into a great run in a matter of seconds. They will offer you a number of boons, and because you can choose which ones you want to spend your resources on, just a little bit of thought can get you a ton of power each time that you come across the merchant, provided you go out of your way to collect enough sacred water along the way. Once you reach the 3rd floor, you want to start to actually thinking a little bit more about preparing for the 4th floor, being a little bit more careful with your honor. Sacred water is still good to collect, but don't take any unnecessary risks to get it. Once on the 4th floor, things get a fair amount tougher, and my best advice is just to focus on actually making it to the 4th floor boss with minimal honor loss at that stage. For that, I've got a bit of a priority order for your room choices, because on the 4th floor, every chamber with a name has one archetype, meaning if you do the gauntlet once on the 4th floor, you know exactly what it looks like if it comes up again on the 4th floor. It's the exact same path, the exact same layout, the exact same solution. The one exception to this is that there is a variant of the ritual trial where you get a guaranteed rare spawn, but only one set of portal callers, which is actually quite fast and easy, and then the normal one with just a bunch of portals around to clear out. That said, my personal priority from ease of completion is ritual trial above all else. Chasing down the portal guys is just really no problem. It doesn't spawn fast enough from the portals to like overwhelm you at all. It's just easy, and there's not much of a timer on it either. Then the gauntlet. Normally the gauntlet sort of sucks on earlier floors, at least in my opinion, but specifically the 4th floor version of the gauntlet is really simple once you go through it for the first time. The only odd part is this trap here is a time circle. You stand in it, then walk into the next room over, use the lever, which will bring the wall up, blocking you in, but then the time circle will recall you back to the other room. The rest is just a super easy, straightforward bit of walking through the level, honestly. Then the chalice trials are great. They're just killing rares. There's no other requirement. It's simple. I find it to be very easy to engage with. There's no timer. You just get it done. Then hourglass challenges are also fine. Being stuck in a confined space with a forced timer on it is much more risky than the other things I've said about so far, but if you have decent boons or afflictions, it's not really a big deal either. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, the one that I very much recommend avoiding as much as possible on this floor is the escape trial. It has a timer, it's full of nasty mob types, including one that can guarantee freeze you and thus take off a bunch of armor off you for free if that happens, and now not only myself but also Josh has had a full trial run just randomly implode from honor loss within the escape rooms on the 4th floor with no trackable actual source, no damage taken, no energy shield lost, nothing visually hitting me as far as I can tell, but honor just draining like crazy until I bottom out, like even after I stop fighting things. If there is a reason for it happening, I don't know why. It could be a bug, it could not be, maybe I'm just blind, but I just avoid the escape trial on this floor as much as possible. Regardless of this, it's an awful room layout to have to deal with it. Of course, you can't always guarantee that you get something like a ritual trial, but you should be more concerned about boons and afflictions than room types anyways, for the most part. However, I view the escape challenge as the exception to that rule. I will never willingly choose that room on this floor unless the other option is basically just fully run-endingly bad. The final bit of advice that I have is to also consider the following number of choices choices after your current room. Boons aside, you'll be able to see 2 choices ahead at the very least, but even without seeing the rooms themselves, you can see the number of connections. An important thing to do is to keep your options open, as if you choose a chamber that only has 1 connection, you will be forced to take it no matter how bad it may be. Using this trial map as an example, here you would probably want to start with the merchant in the center choice if you had any spare sacred water to actually spend, then you would go up to the fountain, one down from the top. The main reason is because there is a forced affliction in the next row. This room gives you the choice between these different connections. This then lets you choose between 3 possible afflictions, which lets you take the least bad of the grouping. Obviously, if you can see far enough ahead, you can plan your path a bit further ahead than this, but this is the general concept. You want to keep your options open. Let's say you then go to the option straight ahead. You are forced to move forward to the bronze key, then forward to the honor restoration, but then again you will end up with the choice between 3 for the second row of forced afflictions. This lets you choose the least bad of the choices before moving forward towards the boss, the final boss, because this is a 4th floor. All that said, that's the pile of information you need to get you to the boss itself, outside of one little bonus tip. There is a boon that you can get as well that gives you 50% of your honor restored, and some other stuff if you go down to 20% of your maximum life. You can actually abuse this if you have it to get a bunch of honor regen before walking into the last boss, simply getting yourself a copy of the life tap support gem. You then want to stick it into a skill that has a relatively low cost that you can sort of spam, spend it and to get rid of your life until you hit 20%. This will make the honor regen pop, and then you can swap the support back out before continuing the next room with your proper setup. That said, that's when we get to the boss itself. 95% of the boss's attacks do very little damage. It does have a high health pool, but not like a crazy, ridiculous high health pool. It doesn't really lock you down with most of its attack, and even the honor loss from getting hit from him is negligible. If you have good defenses and are completing like tier 10 plus maps, generally with your build anyways, you'll probably be fine. With 2 main exceptions to that do need talking about. He has 1 attack where he teleports to the middle of the room, spawns a bunch of time circles on the ground, and then just sort of starts spinning on the spot while emitting a large cone of fast-hitting lightning. If you step in one of these circles, you will get time locked for a couple of seconds, which pretty much just guarantees the lightning spray will hit you for its full duration as he's turning around. Under most circumstances, even this will only cost you like a few hundred honor at most, but it's something to be aware of and something to be careful for when you actually get into the fight. The other one is his one-shot phase. He does this at around 60% health, and then again at around 20% health, he will pop out of the room, start a time trap in the middle, which acts as a sort of timer for you, and then put a bunch of orbs around the arena. You will need to walk into and pick up every orb on the floor before the hands of the clock symbol hit midnight, and while you are picking these up, you will get an increasing movement slow, to the point that a character with no movement speed boost just won't be able to physically do this within the timer, and if you fail, he will poke you in the face guaranteed and one-shot you on the spot, resetting your entire run just like that. The 2 solutions to this are either stacking movement speed increases on your character, with the general rule of thumb most players are saying is that you need at least minimum 30% bonus movement speed to achieve this mechanic without help. I find 35% is a bit more comfortable personally, and then if you can get the movement speed boost boon from the activity itself, it helps a ton too, because it's an extra 40% movement speed. There is also small bits of movement speed that you can get from the skill tree as well, the passive tree, if diverting for those doesn't nerf your build too much, or the final options, which are movement skills. There are stuff like Blink, an actual sorceress spirit skill that can make your dodge roll teleport you instead. There is shield charge if you have a shield. There is leap slam, which leaps forward with a slam. Any skill that has movement tied to it specifically will be able to help you with this at least a little bit. These help with hitting the orbs that spawn particularly far away from each other especially, and in the later stages of this mechanic's phase, it can be very useful to use them when you have exceedingly low movement speed. There is no perfect singular solution to the mechanic. It'll take a bit of trial and error most likely. You absolutely though can beat this boss on first try if you are strong enough. However, don't be disheartened if you don't. Yes, you have to start the trial over again from the beginning, but the boss gets far more manageable and easier to understand once you've actually done it a couple of times yourself. At least that's my feelings about it personally. One final note then is that you can actually do these activities in a group as well, and past that you can actually have players join your run, but only in between floors, not during the middle of a floor in a chamber. So maybe you're great at mobbing, but if you have a friend who's really good at bossing, then you can bring them in when it's time to reach the final floor and bring them for the final boss. Take them up there and just watch them go to town and get the job done themselves. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Your guide to the trial of the Sekhemas 4th floor to get your 4th and final set of ascendancy points, including pretty much every tip that I can think of to make it go easier to get to the 4th floor, through the 4th floor, and then deal with the boss at the end of it all. It may take you a few attempts, sometimes you get saddled with terrible afflictions without much of a choice between them, but all it takes is one decent run to get it all done, and with the knowledge here, it'll make it hopefully easier to get that perfect run in front of you. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and hopefully it helps you out in getting your final points. Like if you liked the video, subscribe subscribe and hit the notification bell for more. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.